Today is October 20, 2015, afternoon work session.
Names on there, but anyway, we've had this discussion in years past.
It's the place we're legally supposed to have it.
I nominate Shirley Brown for chair.
I was going to say, I'm willing to run. All the way.
As fast as you can, and as far as you can.
No, and obviously for those that are here that don't understand, we're not actually voting, we're just trying to decide in public what we're doing. So you want to be chair?
If nominated, I would accept this
Okay.
time.
What about vice chair?
I can only be one.
Caroline.
A rotation, is that where, that's where we would be, so we come back to our rotation again.
Okay.
Frank, you don't want to chair?
You said,
Although that precedent has been
you
set.
said this morning that you'd like to go to
No, not the
Miami
case.
and see how the program is working there. I want to throw my name in the ring for going to Colorado.
No?
In fact, in June.
Okay, we all set with that?
Yeah, for me, fine.
Okay. Then the next thing is the 2016 school board calendar, and I don't know if y'all, did they get the same memo I got on that?
Yes.
They knew that. But I said I didn't really care when that one was, because I wouldn't be there.
Oh, you did? Another one of those I don't care on?
Yeah. November 22nd, I will not be on the board of 2016. Are we supposed to discuss that? Or is this just informational,
Well,
for information
there's
purposes?
you either need to schedule a separate reorg meeting that day, or move the regular November 15th to November 22nd. So you have two options that Zoe needs some input. We can reschedule our November 15th meeting to November 22nd in order to comply with the law. Or you can have your regular November 15th meeting and schedule an additional special meeting on November 22nd.
I think we ought to have a special meeting, invite the high school bands, and the president. Can we get the
What date was that?
staff to get lunch, or can
It's
we?
November, we have to have a meeting on November 22nd, 2016
Okay,
for the reorg.
got it.
We can either have it a separate meeting, or we can reschedule the November 15th and have it be also a regular board meeting.
The reorg takes 5 minutes.
It's that.
It's the week of Thanksgiving, that's the only issue that I have, but school's still in session until that Wednesday, normally anyway.
Yeah. If you do the meeting on the 22nd, we're going to have to bump up the December meeting also, a week.
Bump up or
Yeah. It will have to be,
back? Later.
No, to December 13th.
Just out of
To
curiosity,
go
is
from the
that
6th to the
the,
13th.
is
Okay.
Is
December.
Thanksgiving,
Semantics. You
is
both say the
Thanksgiving
same
on the
thing.
24th? Is Thanksgiving on the 24th?
yeah.
Yes.
We're closed Wednesday.
So the only issue I would see is that it would make nobody could go anywhere other than me for Thanksgiving.
You can go anywhere you want to
But
go.
you have to have a meeting on the 22nd.
The reorg.
It could, yes.
Can we have a morning meeting?
Well, isn't that way every year? I mean, every
No, it's
election?
only during, when you have the, no, it's not that. If you have a general election, I know, we've had this issue before in terms of
I
the
think
space.
we ought to tell the legislature, let us set our own dates.
Well, that's because you can't have a national election until the first Tuesday after the first Monday.
Yeah, but-
So it can't fall on the first, where our school board meeting can fall on the first. Because we don't have that same rule.
I don't care either way.
Okay.
I'm
Well, I
fine
sure
either way, I
don't.
don't know anyone for Thanksgiving. Although, go figure out what else to take.
So I guess the question is, do you want a full-blown meeting or just a very short reorg meeting on the 22nd?
I would go for a short reorg meeting on the 22nd.
That's what I would too.
Can we do, as
From
long
a
as we
staff
have three,
standpoint.
we could do a call-in for that, right?
You have to have at least three,
Well, you have to be there.
Quorum
You
and
can't
present.
call in.
three have to be
According to
there,
Fair Connecticut.
physically.
But, I think
I don't
that
know where I'm going next
the
year.
15th works, because I think that being on the heels of a holiday from a staff standpoint, it may be,
The other thing that's not being brought up, though, is that's also when new board members are sworn in.
on the 22nd.
The 22nd is a given. You will have a meeting on the 22nd,
But
no
whether
matter
it's a school
what.
board meeting and a reorg, or if it's just a reorg.
And if it's whether or not it's just a reorg, you'd still be voting, you know, you'd have all that ceremony. That is going to be November 22nd, period. The question is, do you want your full board meeting?
For
On
the
that
hand
day.
board meeting, right? The
Um,
15th, yeah.
Do you want
Right.
the November 15th meeting to happen on the 22nd?
Exactly. I would say keep 15th, add 22nd for reorg, for staff purposes if it's the day before Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
We're
and
doing
if there's
workshop.
anything that we want done before we get, a new board member, we should do it on the 15th to get that.
So we'll have a
agenda
special,
done.
just a special meeting scheduled on the 22nd. Then, what time would you like that to be? Because there's nothing that says you have to have it at a separate,
You guys okay?
10 a.m.?
10 a.m. on the 22nd?
Works good.
Done.
Yeah.
And everybody was okay with March being the second and fourth Tuesday because of the spring break?
I am.
Okay.
Hi,
I haven't added all those yet. You'll help us with that.
Wait, now, what did you say about March?
March is
changing
gonna be the
second and fourth.
second
instead
and
of first.
fourth instead of first and third because of spring break. Well, everybody closed on spring break.
Good thing I canceled that trip.
It sure is. Let's get it when it's good.
That's better.
Can I get a reimbursement for the $500 I lost?
No,
Maybe not.
that's a no.
I meant from you.
That's a no anyway.
You don't want a chicken?
Okay.
Okay, when does school start?
Do that again, Zoe. Are you talking about March 8th and 22nd? Maybe I'm reading this calendar
16,
wrong.
March 8 and 22 is the second and fourth
Instead of the
Tuesday
first and the
instead of
third.
first and the third. That's
So
all.
March 8th is the second
Second
Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Yes,
And why are we doing that?
because spring break.
Because spring break's the week in between, and we didn't want to have our second board meeting of the month
During
during
spring break.
So we're changing both of them?
Well, you want them 2 weeks apart. It's too different. You have agenda review, everything. You don't want them back to back.
Or you could have just one meeting. And
Yeah, why couldn't you have it on the 1st and the 4th,
You could.
3rd?
Because the 3rd is spring break.
No, you could have it on the 1st and the 22nd.
Oh, yeah, you could do that.
You could do that where they're not 2 weeks
Yeah, so we
apart.
only change one. Why are we changing two?
You could. You can do that, if the board would prefer that.
That probably makes more sense.
I like that.
Okay?
Okay.
So we're going to go with the 1st and the 22nd.
Okay. Okay.
And then January review will be on the 10th, and the meeting on the 1st of March. Scratch that off.
Okay, next.
Your name's on that one.
Are we good on that one? Really what I want to put this on, and I know I've heard some things discussed, I believe that since this selection committee, actually I don't mean the selection committee, the committee that's, and actually that's what I meant on this.
Professional
The,
services.
the committee that's going to meet, that's going to talk about
Ad hoc?
changes to, our ad hoc committee, that's really what I want to talk about. And the reason I say that is because since we're going to be accepting or changing or voting on or whatever we do, whatever the new process, selection process that this group comes up with, I think it would behoove us to, because the last couple of times we had this, I served on that committee, and I want to do that this time, and we kind of don't do kind of change the way the board does those kinds of things. So, but I think it would behoove us to kind of give them some direction on things that this board wants on our new selection process in the beginning, rather than them come up with all their things and then they can report to us and we say, no, we don't want that, we want this, this, and this, because ultimately it's the board's decision. So I know that we've talked about rolling over the short list scores. And if it's something, and that's kind of what I'm saying. If this is something that that the five of us or the majority of us think that this should be part of our new process, I think we got to tell them up front that the board thinks this should be part of the process.
Should we have a workshop with them after they get appointed before they get too far along?
You have to find
Is that
some
how
way
we would do it?
that, this
We
is,
could have
this is
staff
where, this
report
is where it
with-
gets confusing for people trying to do the wishes of the board. If you're, I could certainly have them come to a workshop and you could each individually talk about what you would like to see. What's hard for them to understand is it one board member or is it the board is directing them?
Yeah.
And that's where it gets very difficult. So my recommendation would be this: if you could have a workshop among yourselves with what you believe your priorities are, and that I will convey that.
Well, I kind of thought that's what we were doing now.
No, but when she said, could we have a workshop with them?
I don't
Oh,
think we need
oh,
a
you don't need-
workshop. I just think if there's,
Yeah, that's fine.
if there's particular things that we as a board agree that we would like to see going forward on this process, then I think that it would behoove us to do that. And then they would know what the things that we want to see on our new
I
process.
would like to hear what other districts do.
They plan on doing that. They're going to do research on what other districts as they
I was
review
gonna ask, what is their overall goal, mission right now as it stands? Because I
their
don't know.
policy requires that
Every 5 years.
every 5 years that you review the process.
But what does that look like? Are they meeting?
They will start as a
They start-
committee, an ad hoc committee. They will meet and discuss. They will gather information. They will talk to our attorney probably to make sure that anything that they would recommend as a change is something that would pass the test of law. And they will come to consensus on recommendations of any modifications to present to the board for your consideration, and then you would have to vote on to approve the changes in the process.
How long is that process in the past?
I don't honestly recall how long. It's usually, a month or so to gather the information. I mean, they might have a couple of meetings. So it just depends on how much information they want to gather and review. So I don't know, honestly. It's kind of when you're done, you're done. You don't want them to cut the process short because we've got...
No, agreed. Well, that's right. And I don't, I think it was interesting to see that we all were looking at the process and reviewing. So I agree too. We had a workshop and they're hearing various things, so trying to come to an agreement on, what our main focuses are, what tweaks we wanted to see, if anything. But I don't know. My question is I take guidance kind of from you guys and having been through the process a couple more times, obviously, than I, seeing, what you think needs to maybe be tweaked. I'd also be curious as to what their recommendations are.
And I don't think, they're not going in there with a preconceived notion of what it should be. They are going to be looking at other districts.
And I'm not trying to circumvent their process. I'm just saying if there are certain things that this board wants to see in that process at the end, I think we ought to go ahead and tell them we want to see it. We want it.
I agree with you, Frank. I would like to see either the two combined, the first and second combined, or only the first combined. Eliminate the second, because I think the second...
You wouldn't do any face-to-face interviews at all?
Well, that goes back to my...
First is a paper review.
Yeah. She's talking about I'm assuming you're talking about the short list.
Yes.
Right.
Because we don't currently carry the short list scores forward. That's what I'm saying.
All over from scratch.
Correct.
But I agree with you too. I have, or at least I think I might have, assumed that I knew what you meant. I personally think that, and like I said, I've been through this many times, and we've looked at them across the state. I think the scoring on the live interview is too high.
It was,
Yes.
for me too.
Absolutely.
I think when one item can predominantly change the outcome, I think. And do we really want, because see, the other thing that leads to that, and around different school districts, they do it this way. They actually hire a marketing team to come in and sell that company for that project. Is that what we really want, or do we want to deal with
No.
the principals?
And the scores are very tight, and I guess that the committee was told to make the scores very tight, which I think is not a great idea. But what's local and what's regional, and where do these people play? This is important to me.
I agree with that.
What's local? And to me, local is not Tampa. Tampa is regional. And to have a sub-office in Manatee or here or there is not.
But that's all, it's always been an issue, and it's always something
Right,
that
and
we've
it's
fought.
something-
Saying you can't
It
do
is
much
very,
about
it's
that.
very, they've tried, boards have also always wanted to have local, defining it has always been very difficult.
You
because-
can't have a percentage of like employees, because you could have you could have a group that has, is domiciled in another state, but they do a large amount of work here. And then, but that's what I'm wondering, from a percentage aspect, or even let's say they're all in Florida, but somewhere on West Palm, and then they have an office over here, so when they have projects over here, but from an employment standpoint and a local economy standpoint, they may not be supporting our local economy on the regular. Is there a percent, are we even able to do that, or is it driven?
You have a lot of latitude in defining what local means, that's totally under
And
your
if you
purview.
roll over that shortlisting part of it, the shortlisting criteria, part of it is local
But the other
preference.
problem that I have is in awarding anyone a multi-million-dollar contract that's not done any work for us before.
I don't disagree.
Because they need to show us, well, we've had that was the case this time around too. We need to have this, whoever this construction company is, show us their best work. And that was a consideration in this last issue as well. And I think to do a small job for us, shows us a lot about what they do and how well they do and how they handle the scope of work and ordering product, having product here at a regular time, so forth and so on, how they communicate with their people. All these things are really important, so I think they need to have completed smaller projects with us before they go for the big enchiladas.
See, I agree with you, and I was told that some person who will remain unnamed is never given a job because they refuse to do small
I've heard
jobs,
the
small
same.
projects. But that's not so.
Well,
That's
if part of
another
your,
issue that I think is important, but
if part of your scoring is work you've done for us in the past, if you score a 0 because you've never done any work in the past, then you're probably not going to get the big job. And I agree with you,
Right.
but what you don't want, you don't want to make it, in my opinion at least, totally, extremely difficult to get,
No.
because I hear that all the time too.
I
They won't
know.
even talk to me. I can't even get in
And
the
then
door.
that discourages people from moving forward, and I think that's a concern, and that's why I'm curious if this committee, without us directing it, can kind of investigate and figure out if that's a perception versus a true reality, or if there's something we need to actually change.
Well, again, I think if they hear from the board that that's a board's concern, then I would think that they would look at it.
I certainly agree with that, to figure out what those dynamics are.
and the two criteria for me with a smaller job, there are two definite criteria: under budget and on time. We don't have to make this whole thing overly complicated, but construction management and what that involves, and then having the whole thing about the, which we had problems with the newspaper and others, the whole thing about scoring the cost of a project. We need to have that not get in the way in the early stages, because really, you say, I got 22,000 square feet, let's put that in the computer, and the computer says, all classrooms, bingo, that's my dollar figure. Or do you say, I've got hallways and kitchens and bathrooms and a more sophisticated project at 22,000 square feet, which gives me an entirely different set of numbers and maybe more realistic, and then the scope may have changed and all those kinds of things as well. But those things need to be taken into consideration, because obviously,
Why do we just not have any money in this first phase?
We don't.
I know, but
But they were
put it out there.
included, well,
It was
I
put
know
out
you're saying
there.
that, but they were indeed included, and that's where I think the perception regardless. and
But
I
that
just-
number's driven by staff, it's not
Don't
driven
tell
by...
staff not to do it, because what was put out there was a figure.
Well, if it's in there, people think it's there for a reason, and so it's because the scope has not been clearly identified yet, then the reality is those numbers are illegitimate, therefore they should not be included.
I got clubbed over the head bad with that one. Why would you not hire the low bid? This is ridiculous. What?
No, it's the whole perception.
Yeah, that's my
Yeah,
point.
why would you choose somebody for 15 when somebody do it
That's
for
right.
11?
That's right.
Now, at one point, stay on that for a minute. At one point, we had two people from outside the school district sitting on that committee. And we no longer have that.
And I was gonna ask, kind of, you mentioned that you used to sit on the committee, and at what point did we shift from having, I mean, just who actually makes up that? So no more board members are sitting on committees, and I think that's a board policy going
We
forward.
did that. We did that. Because board members have too much influence, so that when you sit there, even though you're not intending to influence the outcome, you do by your very comments that you make. So we decided that to alleviate that.
Yeah, but
we
the
don't
flip
sit on
side
that.
of that is what we're hopefully accomplishing today, which is to let that
Correct it.
committee know what the board's expectations are, rather than,
I used to
because
that.
it's still ours at the end. I mean, it's their recommendations, just like the decision that the selection committee made last night. It's their choice or their recommendation, but it's not the decision. Which brings me to another thing, and it's going to come out again, whether we talk to the board about this or not, but quite honestly, I think if you sue the school board, and the school board has to pay $150,000 to defend themselves, and you lose, and it's proved that we were within our right, my personal opinion is they should not be on the list to be approved for a major project, again, period, end of conversation.
I agree.
But that is a policy decision apart from what this committee will be making, so
Yeah.
that's something for the board.
But it could be a criteria on the listing, have you ever lost a lawsuit? Because it makes no sense to me, so somewhere or another, whether it's part of the process or if it's part of our policy, I don't think that you ought to be able to do that and get more work.
This is what I have written down so far, so you tell me if anybody disagrees, then I'm not going to feel comfortable, really bringing it forward. So there was discussion about carrying over your score from shortlisting to the second or the interview process, so that the scores are somehow included in that calculation. Then I had the interview should count less in terms of point value of the overall process. That we need to deal with the confusion caused by projecting a cost. There may be things we don't know that you have to have some expectation, but we want somehow dealing with that so it's clear that you're not making a bid in this. And to reward...
Excuse me, Lori, on that, for an example, just as bid work is done in the plans room or whatever, the electronic plans room, maybe there's a range that we have or something that would be a little more flexible and a little less finite.
I think they're aware of the confusion, so let's give them we want some to deal with that issue. That could be a range.
But I'm assuming, though, that, Lori, this number came off, at least the $15 million number, came off of our 5-year capital budget plan or our next year's capital plan, so you can't hardly really do a range on your capital.
Probably not, at some point. But it is also because you have individuals that are doing some of those projections that may not, particularly in a changing environment, part of their goal was to see if they were totally off target in their projection. But there may be other ways of doing that. So I'm not sure how we deal with it, but let's say that we want some way where it's less confusing in terms of the response, that you're not to be projecting what your costs, it's not a bid type of situation.
But my understanding, and one of the reasons why that the costs were off, is that we had left off, or whoever it was that put this thing, had left off some important issues that should have been addressed. It's
not intended again, to be a bid. It was a projection of costs with certain circumstances that did change, and that ultimately changed, and certainly somebody that hasn't had experience does not know that there's some criteria in how we build that does make
Yes.
that cost more of a
Yes.
realistic. So it is not intended to do anything to be our in-staff projection of what we believe the cost will be when building to our standards in the current construction climate. Maybe it is not necessary as part of the process, but it certainly did cause confusion. So they will certainly have that on their list to be concerned with. And I also heard to reward positive direct experience with the school district and somehow in the process, so that there,
And
that
that's,
be,
yeah.
that in the point
On time and in
calculation,
budget.
that
Yeah.
there would be a weight given for positive
Nothing else.
direct experience, whether it's small projects or large, that with experience with the
But see,
school district.
conversely, negative experiences should be penalized.
Well, I think experience in general, and that's where, I mean, I believe that from even
Okay, so
talking to
just
people.
direct experience, or,
Exactly, because I think that if they're on time under budget, but communication was a pain and you're getting people
True,
involved, I mean, those
okay.
are disruptions.
so I
and
said
think those are
include
fair.
direct experience, input on direct experience with the school district, either from staff, because they're not likely to talk about negatives, or from the ones that are making proposals.
Okay, with this, how does someone new, not new to the community, but someone in the community, who's been part of the community,
They do
Obtain,
small projects. They
yeah,
get on the
small
list to
projects.
do small projects.
So, but how do we, and that's something that I will say, out of all of this, probably came up more, and I think I'm not the only one that heard that.
right?
And it's definite, so I don't, that is to me one of the top things I'd like them to address, and what our process is, so it's fair, it's equitable, and it's open, and it's not, it's the chicken and the egg, well, your experience is what's gonna wait, well, if you haven't done anything, you're never getting in. Whatever the reason was, if it was a perception issue and it wasn't the reality, and people have felt that there's no worth going into bid or going into an RFP or whatever we're
But
calling.
I don't know how to,
But that's such a crit.
I know, but you tell me what I'm going to tell them.
Do some investigating, I don't
I
know.
mean,
But she said, well,
because-
like Jane said, on big projects, or projects over.
No, but she's saying there's this belief that somehow I can never get in because there's somehow a conspiracy that's keeping me out.
But if
I mean, if that's the perception, and I don't doubt that there are some people that might have that perception.
Sure, I mean, it's
So
fair amount.
I can tell you that that is not occurring, but you don't have to believe me, but I don't know what to tell this committee.
But I don't know that
to-
I don't know that that's but I'm not discounting what you're saying, but I'm not saying to me that that's a major issue on
But
this.
it is.
But I disagree. I disagree from somebody who had unsolicited.
Again, we're
amount of
talking
people.
about one person. I don't know that we, in my opinion, that we change the whole process or try to do
I'm
something
not talking
on.
about one.
All I'm asking is I don't know what to tell the committee that you want them to include in their,
Reviewing the process as far as experience versus, and also to allow for new opportunities for existing
so
businesses.
I'm hearing in kids.
People who have had experience in other districts, live here, and have had experience in other districts, and are not given an opportunity here.
Or feel that they don't have one.
Because I will tell you, experience is not, in our current process, is not restricted to just in this area.
Exactly.
You had companies like Kraft who had never been
Right.
coming in
Yeah,
this district,
right.
and their experience was totally out of the community. And they built several of our schools. So
But you have
there's,
to realize we've been in quite a lull in construction over the last 5 or 6 years, so nobody's getting a whole lot of work, so.
Fine.
so
Other than the smaller jobs.
So please, do you want me to include the aspect to include direct experience with the school district, input regarding that? Do you want me to include that as something that we want in our process or not?
Important. I won't deny that. It's
Yes,
important.
but
I guess
how
it's
do
a
you,
slippery slope.
but then you don't open it up. Could you?
I guess the point, maybe we're on the same, is where do we jump from small project to giving them a bigger one?
Where do we jump from experience with the district to experience in building schools?
3 projects,
What'd you say?
3 projects.
Minutes, 3 small projects?
I think you want to be careful with that. You want
Yeah, I think so.
you want to have enough flexibility in your guidelines.
I agree with that.
So those are
I'm
the,
not, yeah, and I agree with that. I don't think we should go ahead and do all the work for them, but I think that there's some things that,
so those are the 4 bullets I have.
I mean,
And the fair and equitable, frankly, if it's, we're finding that it's very similar to other school districts' process, they can look at what appears to be the best practice standard in this process that seems to weigh equitably the different aspects that will help us pick those firms that are best suited to do the work of the district. But ultimately, they'll bring recommendations to you, and that it will be the decision of the board to approve them or not.
So let me, in that vein, we have 6 slots that are shortlisted.
That's for small, for the competitive, it's where those are firms that get those small projects.
Right. So how are we going to open the process for small projects to somebody else if we have 6 defined people right now that get those projects?
Which went through a process, which are approved by you.
My question is, do we want to leave it at 6, or do we want to expand it to 7 or 8 that are considered?
This was you just expanded it from 5 to 6. And the problem is the more you add to the list, then the work gets distributed to more, but it is less. And eventually, there are firms that won't bother to apply because they don't get any work. So we may not have 6 projects that meet the criteria that require, because we do a lot of things in-house, or where we handle it ourselves. Right. So it has to be a fairly large project to go to one of those firms. So you have to ask yourselves in that approval time, how are you going to have 6 projects, and if every one you add, then it's the distribution becomes
and Jane's background being similar to mine, at least, you can understand that you don't just ramp up for a $2 million job, and you don't just ramp up for a $100 million job on the spur of the moment. These companies are not going to go hire a bunch of people for a project, particularly the top people. So they kind of have to know where they're at and when they're going to get their next one, because they've got project managers and superintendents and assistant superintendents that are on these jobs, and when they're done, they need to know that they've got something else to do with these people, otherwise they have to lay them off. And that's just the reality, and it's just multiplied by 100 when you're talking about building a high school or a middle school or something.
Are we evaluating these people on that short list frequently so that we...
Yes, it's by your policy.
We're done.
And they compete in a similar process of shortlisting, and then it's presentation to be on the list, not for a specific project, to be on the list that is approved for gaining some of those competitive projects. So that's the current.
So then tell me how someone gets it. Tell me how someone breaks in and to do a small project if they're not on that list.
A low score or high score, depending on how it's graded.
No, you're not offered.
Because they were the lowest of all the reviewers in all cases. They did not meet the 6 of the 6. They were below the 6 highest.
We didn't take number 7, and we didn't take number 8, and we didn't take number 9. Do we want to take number 7, number 8, and number 9 at the expense of number 1, number 2, and number 3?
That's not my question. My question
Kind of is, because that's what you're saying that you want.
I want
if
to
somebody
know
else comes in, then somebody else comes out.
My suggestion is
how
this.
do they get a small job if they're not on the approved list of 6?
My suggestion is this, that in the case, if they want honest feedback on what caused them to be ranked lower than 6 others on all of the participants, then we can give them feedback. This is why. And then they can see what are the qualities that we need to improve in our company that will make us more competitive.
And we can give them feedback through Mark Smith?
I'm going to have it through Scott, because I don't want anybody contacting the individual except for Scott, but he can gather what was the reason. In this case, this company was ranked below every participant ranked them, did not rank them in the top 6. Therefore, I think there's feedback that could be gained. We do the same thing when we have candidates for administrative positions and they find that they're not in the top candidates. We can give honest feedback, and of why we believe that is the case and what you can do to improve your chances in that process.
But I don't think, and I, I may have nothing to do with what you're talking about, Caroline, but I don't think that it's the board's, bless you, that it's the board's responsibility to spread out the work as far and wide as we possibly can.
I think you run into a slippery slope, and you don't want to be so reactive, and I think that's for almost anything that we run into. I will say that we have an opportunity to respond to things that we heard, that we'll hear anytime, whatever. And if there is a way, as far as a directive, I'm not sure if there's a line that we can say, but, when we look at experience, that we ensure that we're not closing the door to additional applicants or such, additional qualified applicants, if we want. I mean, again, that language is really for them to come up with, and we can tweak that after the recommendation is, because I do think making it too narrow will potentially hurt us with an unforeseen consequence in the future, but it is something I'd like to kind of uncover if we can, so.
I don't know, I've been trying to do this for 2 years.
Well, I'm glad we're moving forward, that's all I can say.
Jane, you mentioned, was it Jane or Shirley mentioned about the bidding on that last big job?
Yep.
Would have been really interesting
Good use of
had
it.
it gone the other direction to see what had that GMP been over $11.2 million, how
It
things
would have
were.
definitely gone over, I'm sure of that.
So. Do you have anything else
Really groups the basics, yeah.
on that subject?
And so who do we have that we're
I don't have
voting on?
my,
I think
it's
Mary
Mary
Slapp
Slapp
and
is the,
Jerry, John Craner.
yeah, there's
Steve
two
Canty.
New people.
new people, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, it's a new
Was
committee.
Steve on it before?
Steve Canties, no, I think he's
He's
new.
new too.
He's just had a lot of experience recently.
Right.
The process.
One more thing for him to do, right?
Okay.
There's a lot on his plate.
Okay, we'll move on to student code of conduct.
Well, I gave this, and I don't like wasting paper. I'm a big digital person, so I apologize if you don't want to read through all this. And really, it's interesting because this morning, I don't know if I had sent this over, realizing what we had quite yet on our morning agenda. So it ties in nicely, and it really kind of tails off of something that initially Shirley brought in. And I fully agree with us really talking and addressing the out-of-school suspension alternatives. And this morning's presentation was awesome. It was very exciting. So, I think I brought it up because I know I've talked to more and more people in the community, and they're really eager to help out how we can. And I know that we were going to continue talking about, and today was one example, and I'm not sure if there are additional things.
We're still exploring what alternatives are out there, but I'm finding that some of the alternatives offered to other districts are really no better or not what I think is a real academically focused use of time. If you expect students, you're not suspending them, but they're to go to another site, find their own transportation, and stay 2 to 5 days to have a substitute there to provide education. To me, that's not any more quality. So I'm looking for quality options for out-of-school suspension, beginning with being proactive, which is kind of what you saw today. But also there is this higher tier of a tool that is definitely used in lieu of out-of-school suspension. We're not there yet. It's where you bring in families and the students, and you have that restorative conversation, and you do that in lieu of a suspension. So we're looking at that eventually being an option on our student code of conduct particularly for some infractions, not the most serious, but for those that are less serious, particularly for second time types of infractions, that we don't jump to out-of-school suspensions, and we look at some other mediating process, such as the restorative practice. So we're going to include that in the revision of the student code of conduct as being more directive. But I think largely where we're at now with that is to be more preventive in terms of not having a culture in a classroom and dealing with some issues before they escalate to the point of requiring a consideration of out-of-school suspension. We now have a way of quickly getting data to principals on out-of-school suspension. Where are the students, and how are the students performing in other areas? So it's kind of an at-risk report that they are going to be monitoring. We're monitoring it more closely. I think when you start looking at data, people begin to think differently at what are the other options. So I suspect that we're going to begin to see some declines. Particularly, we've shared the data across schools, so they see, it appears at my school, we're having more out-of-school suspensions than another school. Maybe I need to talk to that principal and get ideas of what they're doing. So we're having a lot more conversation about it. And I think that just sharing of what they're doing also has an impact in the data. So there's a number of things that we're doing at all levels.
How about our Y program, SCSB, that is doing some counseling in various middle and high schools? Do we have any data on that as to how, Sonia Santiago's programs? Do we have any?
SCSB's children in need of services, families in need of services.
Do we have anything?
I don't have anything specific.
But we ought to
to
draw
that.
them, I think, into letting them
Yeah,
know
I
what
mean,
we're doing.
there's several agencies who do work with students that we're looking at having conversations to see if there's ways that they can help support that.
Which I think is going to be key, because we're going to be at a limit to how many resources we're going
Absolutely.
to essentially have. And
Absolutely, and they
so
can
many.
be, and you can, there are school districts that basically have it's kind of like a whole nother triad type of, but it's for shorter, it's not the full year, it's like for so many days. That's very expensive, and I'm not sure it really makes the changes that I'm glad we have Triad. We need to have Triad and support it, because that's very important. I'm not sure a 30-day stay in that kind of situation does anything but cause some significant interruption. So before we jump into a really expensive model that are out there at some of the school districts, I think we're looking at alternatives in a range that is something that we can sustain over time.
What JFCS does in 5 of the schools.
Absolutely, and that's
Individual and group counseling with the kids that are might be suspended or expelled. So we work with them, a counselor works with them individually on groups, and we provide mentors for the kids too.
We're also looking at the data from that, because we need to know we're helping to subsidize some of that with Title I dollars. We need to make sure that that they're using it effectively. They may be providing a great service, and maybe we're not utilizing it with the students that are facing suspension. So I think we're drilling down to making sure that that's being used to help with those issues.
At the last FSBA meeting, we had Dr. Shelley present, was it the SAIL program? That's with New College too, right? Were you there?
Yeah,
Did
we
you
both
see that?
introduced her. Didn't you do the first section
Oh,
and I did the other one? But anyway.
Yeah, there you go.
But no, and those are exactly where.
Yeah, and then our teen court program.
Absolutely. Well, I think very much what we talked about this morning is the culture of it. I mean, that's what I think Dr. Shelley's done between just her leadership in general, and then different things she's implemented. And that's going to work at one school, and depending on the administrator at the other school, I mean, they have to own whatever programs they're really putting in. I think from a district level, because I've heard us talk about it, and I'm not going to speak for anyone here, but I think it's something we feel pretty passionate about, because I think it obviously plays a pivotal role on the academic side of things, because if you have those disruptions. And another thing, and this is kind of just to put, I know we talk about it, and I've heard us say, and the more and more I've dove in, I really see the need, and I keep hearing it, and I know from a resource standpoint, we may not be there, and I've looked at other districts that do something kind of more on the creative side, but it's filling the needs of the social worker aspect, because that's going to be huge. And I don't even know what that looks like from a number standpoint. And I know you have, because you've heard us.
We're looking at a homeschool liaison model, and we're actually going to be making a presentation to a foundation for a grant to support some additional homeschool liaisons at some key schools where there are higher levels of need. A homeschool liaison has the social worker credentials, but it is a teacher, and it is very much targeted on making that link between home and what's happening at school in whatever way possible, and that is their total focus. So we're kind of looking at how does that model um, provide that type of support between the home and what's happening in the school, and making those connections in a way that has positive outcomes for the students. So that's a little bit less expensive because
Right.
social workers have
Degrees.
but it's still, well, it's not the degree, it's a program specialist. It's a salary schedule that allows them to have a longer day, but we're looking at what are ways that we can add to the group of people making the link, and have the skills and the credentials that really provide support, but can be done in a way that is more sustainable, and we can add positions that provide that levels of support, where they would still have a social worker tied to that school, but this would be someone dedicated to work between the parents and the schools at that single school. So
We
it's
we did have that, and that was one of the things matter of fact, that was probably one of the first things that was eliminated.
And I've heard you guys say that, and then when you hear and you're talking to so many of the different schools and you're seeing that being such a baseline of issue from the behavioral standpoint, and there is that limitation, but it's disruptive, what, that we have to take an action to some point. So, but I know that there are alternatives than direct social workers, so I wanted to see. So that's good. And you said those are teachers.
They're teachers with an MS degree. I mean, they have the social worker credentials, but they're hired on the teacher salary schedules. But the
Okay.
position it's one of the job descriptions you can look at is called a homeschool liaison.
Okay.
Well, so much talk is out there now about mental health too, and somebody was talking to me, like 40% of all mental health issues show signs while they're still school-age children.
Absolutely.
And like very little is being done to mental health, period. But especially when we're talking with young people, and I'm not talking about somebody who's upset, because, mom and dad had a fight, but somebody who has a mental health problem because something's wired wrong in their brain, or a lack of chemicals, or, I mean, we don't even know what this is yet. And that's something else. It's just the schools, I guess, have to reach out to so many areas.
I talked to a couple of different leaders in our community of young preschool age children, and they said, oh, wait till you see some of the children that you're going to get. They're defensive, they have no boundaries, they are attacking to their teachers. He said, they both were saying as administrators over foster care families and kids in various different segments of the lower socioeconomic and poverty-stricken area, that it's getting worse and worse, and so it's a big concern.
No doubt. Well, that was really all I wanted to say. I know I've talked to you about it, and I think it's really important, and I think hearing some other comments, that just keeping it on our radar and just getting an update and seeing what we're changing. But I'm very excited about what we have today. So
Number 7, right back at you.
Okay. So this was discussed briefly, but I think during that time it was alluded to that forum was not the appropriate place. So I just wanted to dive in a little bit more on our process, because this has been asked to me, and I'm not, I think we've discussed it, but, again, and I will preface this with, you don't want to be reactive and make something change, dramatically and have unforeseen consequences. So, but really kind of getting an idea of what the process is from a disciplinary action, and I have our employee rights unit as far as the progressive discipline, but I think my question was, the program is progressive in that, except in cases that constitute a real imminent danger to the district or flagrant violation. The flagrant violation part is where I wonder where, and I know there are not absolute terms, but how do we address issues where we need to, from an administrative level, not that doesn't fall under the, collective, the contract.
So you're talking about disciplinary action against administrators?
Specifically, yeah, I guess.
Okay.
For administration.
Typically, because they work year to year, in most cases, there is a process that simply could result in a non-renewal.
Okay.
Over the last 5 years, and these are all for a variety of reasons, and sometimes you'll eliminate a position, and decide that and maybe it's because we don't think the person's in the right seat on the bus, and they could be reassigned to a different position, perhaps one that they accept less pay for. So in some cases that's occurred, but there have been actually resignations and allowing a contract to expire for about 13 individuals administrators over the last 5.5 years. If we don't renew, there are individuals, and that has been increasing in the last few years, that are not given a rollover of their contract in December. That gives them knowledge that right now they are not recommended for renewal. They have opportunities to improve performance, and if we don't see those improvements, then it could lead to a non-renewal, which has also occurred. In some cases, they've been given the opportunity to go for teaching positions if they have a teaching certificate. In terms of disciplinary, we've had, over that time span, there's been 2 5-day suspensions. But I will say, if you've got an administrator who warrants disciplinary action, it's probably someone that I feel is not meeting the bar, and might be someone who does not get renewed. So, and they may choose to resign. So, it's handled sometimes a little differently, because at administration, there's no guarantees from the superintendent on down. You work at the pleasure of those that supervise and make recommendations for your renewal of your contract.
I specifically want to be able to see that something gets put in their personnel file when actions that are done by an employee turn around and cause us to be sued. There was somebody's administrator, somebody was over those 2 people that didn't do what they were supposed to do also. So there should have been something in the employee's file, but also the administrator above them. There should be something in their file too for not following through with what they did. And in these cases, I don't think there was. And I want to make sure that in the future, we do follow through with things like that. I'm not saying we make a big thing and parade it up and down the street, but it should at least be in their file. And in case we are sued later on, we told this person this is what, not so, well, we had a discussion.
And just know that there's things that you can do with administrators that we don't do with those that are part of the bargaining unit. For example, a letter of instruction which defines what are the expectations, which is not considered disciplinary. That is something provided that is not part of their permanent record. And it is because it's not disciplinary. It only becomes part of the permanent record when it is disciplinary, which is either a verbal reprimand, and you've talked about a written reprimand, suspension, termination. So
So a letter of instruction, just for clarification, doesn't go in their file?
a letter of instruction is not part of their permanent file. Sometimes it's a copy is in a side file, but it's not part of the permanent record because it's not considered a disciplinary action. That is my understanding. Now we've got records of it. Pardon?
Who makes that determination?
Of whether it's a part of the permanent record? I don't know if Pat's here. Is it part of the collective bargaining agreement?
Want me to talk?
Is it okay? Because she can
Yeah,
confirm and I'll end up giving you this
I didn't know you were
information.
here.
That's how I want it to be. We created that for a good employee that might have made a mistake, like, I don't even know, even sometimes it's to help teachers, like we had a teacher accused of things at Brookside one time. Both the brother and the sister at different times during the day said Mrs. Jones touched something or something. It was a complete lie. So they would write a letter to the teacher saying, okay, in the future, and there's a form letter, please do these things. Make sure you're not in the room alone with so-and-so. So, in the future, make sure you have your lesson plans here. In the future, make sure your things on the board. It's for a good employee that might have made a mistake. And it's also for the future so that you can come back and say, I told you on this date that it's to be done this way, and you didn't do it. That might lead to a verbal, which is the next thing. So we created that so that poor Shirley just made a mistake, but she's been here for 25 years, doing an excellent job, she made a mistake, and we just write her a little, in the future, please do it this way. So that's why it's not disciplinary. It does go in your site file, so it is a permanent record for the site file, but it doesn't go in the other one. It says right on it, this is not disciplinary in nature.
So site file versus,
Well, I don't think
permanent
that there
file.
was even something on the site file then.
well, I guess,
But we're talking about two different things.
Yeah.
We're talking about people that are protected by the collective bargaining agreement,
That's
which
all.
we know how difficult it is
right.
to work, because you have to work through the entire process. You take something like the situation that we're talking about now. My personal opinion is, when you're told to not do something, you do it anyway, that's insubordination, you should be fired on the spot. There shouldn't be, we warned you, because when you go back and look at what is written about it by the judge, it's lack of institutional control. And I don't want to say we keep having these things, but it's occurred over the time that I've been on the board now, where we end up getting accused of lack of institutional control. And I'm just, and obviously with the teacher, you wouldn't do it, probably wouldn't want to do it. But in this particular instance, and these are people that make, and it's not just what their position is, they make a lot of money, and you shouldn't have to say, don't do it, go down there and check, they're doing it again, so you go back down there and say, quit doing it, and then,
I think that enforcement loses credibility at that point, and that hurts the process in itself.
I guess I'm not arguing that
No
things
doubt.
should have been done differently. And I'm certainly that the supervisor of that individual feels that he would have done it differently. But I can tell you, when you look at 13 people that are not in the same positions, there are things that happened. And I don't know of another incident like this that had occurred with an administrator. Our administrators, when they are asked to not do something, they do it. And if they don't, there are ramifications, and have been. Sometimes they're not at the level that you see at the board, because they are changes of their positions. And that has
what I'm
occurred.
saying is, if it's insubordination, which clearly this was,
I-
and there's other ones, I don't, we do
We
things
don't know.
we do things to set examples across this district every single day. It's half the reason we do half of what we do is to set an example. So I think sometimes you have to set that example. I know that when I had my company, I would have servicemen show up. Thankfully, it didn't happen very often, but they would show up under the influence. But did they get a warning? Nope. They were gone because, A, I couldn't have a technician go in somebody's house under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and B, it showed everybody else that if they showed up under the influence, they were gone.
And I guess where I think I see it from kind of an outside big picture is, especially in certain roles, and the challenge, and I believe this takes part, but I don't want it to, I guess, and I may not, or it may, but I'm just, that there has to be certain areas that are just absolutely acceptable, black and white out. And again, I don't know, again, I'm trying to look forward, and so I don't want to react and change a policy and then it really hurt us, because I don't like, I think you box yourself in and then you create more of a problem in the future. But I think if there is something that we can do, or from a cultural standpoint even, that if almost to his point, that you be made an example, nobody is too high up or whatever, or too valuable, because
But this administrator, even when we suspend him or move him out, we got inundated with letters of support for him.
I know, and actually,
Wanting
you
us
still do.
to, let him, at the graduation.
But I would say in these roles, in all of them, you're gonna have that, and that's where we would expect it, but you have to look at
I guess even if
almost the negative.
even if everybody likes you, if you break the rules, you break the
Well,
rules.
because how many other people does that hurt from even a morale standpoint that think, that are also leaders in our organization? That's something I get concerned about, because that changes the cultural morale, and that is something we need to protect inevitably. So, I don't know if there is any change, and that's why I'm saying, but I think because we started to talk about it, but it wasn't the right place, so I wanted to bring it up and see if And I know, I'm thinking, trying to look more forward and say from a scenario base, if
I think we have a high standard for administration. It's a higher standard than anybody else in the system in terms of what our expectations are. Infractions that would not get you reassigned or terminated as in the collective bargaining agreement will get you without a job in the administration, and that I will tell you with the number of people that has occurred to over the last few years that we do have that high standard. I think the lesson learned is that there needs to be greater documentation, written documentation, when we're specifically saying something, and so certainly we are taking care that we do document when there is an expectation. But I do believe that our administrators are held to a high standard, and we have some great administrators performing incredible things, and we want to support those. And those that are not in the right seat in the bus, we need to treat them with due process so that they can not be unfairly have consequences that they face, but that there is an understanding that we expect a lot out of our administrators in their conduct.
I'm going to share with you, I don't have the information with me now, but a parent concerned that a teacher, first week of school, says, starts talking politics and saying that, they don't believe in all this climate change crap, and they're not going to follow that book. They're going to teach their own stuff. No, that's not allowed, so you go through the process, and then they go, well, that's a pretty good guy, and, that's not really what he meant, but, they shouldn't, I read, you're not supposed to be bringing your political feelings into the classroom. I mean, that's not the place to do it. I actually had that, I was bringing that copy with me, and I left it in my other folder. But, was there anything written up in that employee's folder or that supervisor's folder that was okay, or the supervisor of that supervisor who still said, well, yeah, it's okay?
I don't know how to respond without knowing the specific situation.
I'm going to get you that file, and I'm going to look at what I said and what we said. We need to start making examples, because you can't just say, well, he's a good guy and normally people like him.
Well, and I guess that's where even if we're going to, from the letter instruction, if the thought process, even if the thought, or what's the word I'm looking for, if there is the appearance that oh, okay, I got just a letter of instruction, but it wasn't a real.
Was there at least a letter of instruction given in this case?
But
I don't know.
That there is, I just think, and I think this, we'll use the example that we're talking about, because I think that person wasn't very, very popular and well-known in the community, and that, I think, definitely makes it hard to make decisions. But in the positions that we're in, it's inevitable. I mean, as a leadership position, there are hard decisions you have to make, and for people that and have, 80% of their job is amazing, but there are certain violations that are just, we talk zero tolerance, and we want to be, almost tying into that. You can't have it specifically black and white, but there are some that end up hurting us much more in the end, and that needing, from a morale standpoint, for those who are, because I think we have phenomenal leadership, really. That's why I think it's something that needs to be protected, and examples do need to be made. So that's where I stand on that, but I don't know as far as if there's any change or needs to be done, if that's worth a conversation.
Yeah, I agree that just because somebody's a good guy, they should still follow, and if the letter of instruction should have been, and it should have, and why wasn't one given in, I'll look to see, and I'll follow up with you on that one.
That's all for me.
I have another,
And I have another as well.
Just an FYI. The change of the start date in August might be a problem for us. No? It might be a
It's 2
problem
days
for
earlier
us.
than last year,
No, we're starting on August 14th.
and we started on what? The
The
17th or the 16th?
19th,
A
I
week
think.
later.
Did we?
This is the way the calendar committee, they were attempting to see, is there a way we could finish the first semester before the winter holiday and not start too early?
Mm-hmm.
And I think they've come with a great proposal. that is mid-August, not that many days. And you
A
have...
week and a half, actually, before August is over.
And so I think that's very doable for staff to be able to finish the first semester before the winter break, so kids aren't coming back after a holiday to take their finals, which has been a common complaint. But it always, before, we'd have to start so much earlier. It's just how those calendars have worked out that they were, for both years, we'll be able to guarantee that. And I think it meets a real need with a minimum impact in terms of the August start date.
I think it's great that testing will be completed before the holidays, but I'm telling you, they're gonna have parents that are upset. That's all I'm doing.
I think a lot of us got those emails, and I think they're,
I got it verbally.
well, that's you, I completely understand that, but I also, I think from an instructional standpoint, when I heard, that there's a break, I would like the students to really be able to relax on their break. I mean, and our staff. I mean, that's a critical time, and I certainly know from when I went to school, you started a new semester going back. So I'm excited that we can all fit it into one without it being a dramatic, getting rid of the entire month of August. I know, unfortunately, I think that there will always be, and we all know this, that there's going to be people who are unhappy with one way or the other way. But I think if we're looking at from an instructional standpoint, which is where we stand, I'm happy that we're able to get it done before, but I do know and have heard that it will maybe, there are a fair amount of families that it would interrupt the travel time for them to see their family, so.
And I have another too. I just have a...
Wait a minute.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Lori.
I have a draft of the board retreat agenda.
Did everyone meet with the consultant?
Yes.
Yes.
Retreat wrap-up and group song.
When are we gonna sing? Are we gonna, do we get a stick?
Sitting in a circle.
Yeah, but it won't be used for the same reason it was in that video.
The chair does not get the stick. That's gonna be
And I just wanted to make sure that Deborah got input from everyone in crafting this. She's met with me a couple of times. So this is what we've come up with in terms of the retreat agenda, but before we finalized it, I wanted to let you have a look at it.
Is it group lunch or individual lunch?
It's group. You're going to be
Frank,
with us.
killing him.
You can eat outside, I suppose.
Is that lunch / open bar?
No.
Yes, that was Frank. He said bar, open bar.
For the press that's covering it.
That's a lot to cover, and
And I thought we needed 3 days.
I think she even thought so. She was like, "Wow, okay, well, I mean, it's a great agenda. I mean, I think it covers everything.
Looks good on paper anyway, huh?
Let's talk that.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
none? Well, that's what we're going to go with.
Jane?
Legislatures. I didn't make it to the meeting last week. Caroline went to the FSBA meeting to get finalized our FSBA legislative platform, and we should have that approved in December at our meeting. And I know that there's a lot of effort that has gone into that, and it's consolidated into 4 items. Hallelujah, thank you very much. It's a lot smaller than our consortium. But I was just going to update you all. Lori and I went to the, and Bridget was there, the county commission to present our issues to the legislative delegation, and of course Senator Dieter was not there. And I found out about that a week early, so I went to see her at her office. So I did cover our issues with her. She mentioned that she would like to do something for us before she leaves the Senate, and I told her if there was anything that she could do, it would be the Alta Vista project. And so that's the way it was left. I know they're all back having a splendid time in Tallahassee, trying to get the Senate redistricting and who runs when issues together. I didn't know if anybody had talked to anyone in the legislature. Bridget, I don't know if you could give me an update, please, as to where you had approached folks.
Well, I met with the Eric President last Thursday, and that was one of the topics, and he is very excited. They're looking at the expansion aspect of it, and beyond just the 4 that we are looking at, just from a big picture standpoint. He said from the data and who he sent it to, who is a number of people, all of the responses have been very positive. So overall, it's looking very good. You know, I think
In the House.
In the House, Senator Legg is aware of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
It was in a meeting I had with him. That was not the main topic, but I was going to certainly try to get that in there, and it melded quite well in the way the conversation went. So it is on their radar. Definitely, if Senator Dieter can help in that aspect, I mean, that'll be great to help champion or any other. And the Senate always seems to be a little bit different than the House, so.
Way different.
Yeah, just a little. But I would say from it's something that I think there's a lot of people who believe in it, and the results speak for themselves. And there have been many calls to both Dr. Kingsley and
Yes.
Dr. What am I bringing up? Shirley. Thank you. And so I think it's looking very good. I just get, you know how I said this, and I said this to you. You don't want it. You want to. You know, it's a long road ahead, and we don't know, especially with this session, what to expect.
Well, we never do, but
we are trying to get it on everyone's radar, so even to the end game, that it doesn't get even line item vetoed.
Do we need to look at putting on, you say, hiring a lobbyist for special issues? Because I understand it was that amount was still in the budget that we
for the lobbyist.
So, I mean,
No,
maybe we need to look at that.
Personally, after me having these, I don't think it's worth it. I think that we have great, really, I mean, and I know you said this initially, but, you know, I think between our organizations and our personal relationships, I do know when it gets up there, it's a totally different story. But
I was talking about this specific
exactly.
issue because the organizations won't be fighting
No,
this
exactly.
issue.
But I'm saying relationships derive from those organizations that we have. So at least from my standpoint,
No.
I think I don't know. You know, I personally I don't know. I feel like it's going very well right now. I'm very cautious on spending more money up there. But I would say if we are going to do a lobbyist, we do like the item of it being item specific than just
that's where I was thinking item specific because it helped us out for Northport. And our FSBA is actually puts the legislative agenda to the school boards to vote on. Do you all have a legislative agenda with your association, or do you share that with other board members?
Yes, we do. I know we don't think we have it finalized, though. I think we have 2. Well, no, the main thing we've been actually focused on is the testing, the task force. So that's been just a big topic. It's really just meeting with the different legislators to understand what's expected. And I think the feedback we've gotten is don't expect any major changes this year in any education aspect. And that's almost consistently what I've heard from both Senate and House. And that, you know, because I think the last couple of years have been pretty volatile. And so that our focus has been really just trying to grapple with some of the testing issues. That has been our main focus from a legislative platform.
A legislative issue that came up to me through a local group here, and I've been reading in the paper that it is, and I understand a legislator put it forth before FSBA was an elected education commissioner.
We
I
are
like that a lot.
doing a resolution on that. It's been proposed. It has to go to the board of directors in December. So the board of directors agrees with it, or the majority of the board of directors agrees with it, that will come forward.
Good.
You know, I think there's a confluence of different organizations that would say, yeah, we want a voice. And getting an elected education commissioner would give us that voice.
And cabinet seat.
And it would also be another cabinet seat. So there might be enough will from several sides to push that forward.
Because of
So
everything that's been going on in the state this last couple of years.
we can join hands and sing Kumbaya with your organization.
I'll speak as few things. I think we've been laser focused, like I said, trying to work with the legislature in a effective solution because it was such a nightmare last year.
Yeah,
And
you know, I think
trying to
something-
make it kind of focused on that.
We
So,
done?
I have another, sorry.
Yes.
Really quick. I already talked to, this was short, right? I think it's
We
what.
had another hour.
I had spoken with the superintendent in regards to various number, and it's not just the one email that I think we were all copied on, but there has been some concerns as far as parents not being able to effectively help their students with their math homework with the new change in math. And so I asked Lori, I know that as it's evolved, you have to, I think that in a conversation, sometimes it's whether or not they agree with the way we're teaching it, or is it how we can help them help their students. So I want to focus on helping their students right now, and that's what we talked about. So you want to give us an update?
Sure. And focusing primarily where the concern is coming is from our elementary parents. And after the end of next week, we will have provided professional development for all of our teachers. We're doing the last 4th and 5th grade is next week. Part of that professional development is helping our teachers understand specifically how to make sure their students are able to access the supports at home. And at least for those that have the internet access, what are the websites, and how do you get your teacher's lessons, the actual textbook, and all the supports that are there. We're completing that. It's very easy to get that access, but it's kind of making sure everybody understands not only how to get the access and what is there when they get online. There are amazing parent supports that are part of the program. It is very specific to the lesson, that the student is working with or what they're assigned. There are videos that kind of help explain it for both the students and the parents. So I think we need to move into that phase and see then how parents are doing. There's other things that schools are trying. It's not consistent at every school. Some are incorporating some guidelines as part of their open house. Some are having parent night activities, and Sue and D'Angela and Triana, who is working this year with the implementation of the textbook, is working with those schools and how to develop some parent nights. So there's a variety of things that are happening, but everyone that has access to a computer with internet access would have access to the support materials that are online that are deeper than we've ever had before.
And sometimes I feel like we have resources, and for whatever reason, there's it's not getting to, and I don't know what.
That's why we're hitting every teacher.
Okay.
This has been during the day, half-day trainings, it's by grade level, and they spend an hour and a half just on the resources that are available. So like I said, we will have hit every single teacher by the end of next week when we'll be completing it with 4th and 5th grade.
Is there something on our website we can make it easier for parents to say, this is where,
It's I think
go?
we need to make sure that it's through the teachers so that they know, now we're ready to have my class access it at home, and because there's things that the teacher can provide as part of the resource. It's not something open to the general public. It is because they have to use the ID and the password that the student has. They know all of that. So we need to make the communication come from the classroom to the parents, because then the student will know what I'm supposed to do to get online, and we'll have practiced that. So I think that's how it seems to work the best in terms of the rollout, because then it's only when you put in those identifiers that it gives you access to that student's textbook and that teacher's lesson, and it actually gets information on if the student had done some work, what their scores were, and how they were doing. So it gives the parent some information, but it's driven specifically for that teacher, that student, their textbook, and their resources.
And where does that tie into? And I've seen it, and I'm not even 100% sure it's how much of it's accurate, but you see some of these postings on the internet about this math and about how these kids are taught to add and subtract. And if there's any truth to that, I couldn't help my grandkids on how to add and subtract. Is that true? I mean, is that how they do it? Where they do it in parts
it
of
is.
100 and stuff?
What we're finding, and this has been supported through some years of research, that we're, in America, if you really analyze, why, we know we've got smart kids that should do very well in math. Why do we continue to not perform at the highest levels when you're looking at across the world? And I'm not going to argue, you know, who they test, not that. They have students that are doing much better in math. We have students that come in from other countries that are at a higher level. What makes that so? Their brains are the same. We should be more competitive. And there's been a real reliance in this country in terms of math to be very much procedural driven. You learn the steps, you follow the steps, and and that works fine until you've got tweaks in how they look different, and all of a sudden, if it's not following the set procedure, you don't have a deep enough understanding of the concept, and you can't manipulate things as fast. You see it all the time. You'll see a student do a long division problem, following the steps, make an error that makes the difference doesn't make sense anymore, and they don't recognize it because they are ingrained in not thinking, what if I just look at that number? People that really have strong numeration skills, they will turn it into a number that they could just do in their head, just to get an estimate. It's a quick way. You do an easy problem and say, this one's going to be should be around that. So when they get an answer that's way off, they know immediately, so I did something wrong because this doesn't make sense. But if you are just ingrained looking at the procedures, you don't even recognize that you've made an error in terms of logic, that doesn't make any sense, does it? Something's wrong. So I'm telling you that some of the strategies that are being used to helping kids is not to say you have to think this way all the time, but it gets them to think beyond the simple, this is the only way to solve that problem, and understand that there's different ways that you can think about numbers, so that you might think of multiplication sometimes as an array and sometimes groups of things. You need to be flexible because it could be either one of those. But if I think of it as an array, then when I know area, how you figure area, it makes sense because you've understood multiplication to be as an array.
Which could certainly go back to what Bridget was talking about, the emails from parents that can't figure out how on earth to help their kid with these math problems because that's not how they were taught math.
Well, that's precisely why I'm saying that, because if it's an alteration at the end of the day, and we are very supportive of parents being involved in their children's academic success, we want to be able to provide resources, and I know getting the teachers up to speed because it was a huge transition for them, so obviously they need to know if they're teaching it, but now I'm hoping we can also provide those resources to the parents so they can be supportive, because I can't imagine how frustrating that would be trying to help your child and not being able to, especially when we're talking elementary. Now I know, secondary education, that may be a different story, but when we're talking about, the basic skills of elementary, I want to make sure we are providing whatever communication, and sometimes we have it there, but for whatever reason it's not connecting, and that's why I wanted to be there.
Well, that's why we've been taking time to make sure our teachers understood the resources so they can help link those with their parents. And parents have that greater communication with their child's teacher. But I went through some of the animations, which are the little videos, and they're wonderful. How they kind of do the teaching so that the parent can view that, the student can view it again, and they can learn together. This is what the expectation is.
It's like 20 minus 17 is 3. Well, how did you get 3? Show me how you arrived at 3. I mean,
But
it's
also
common
the-
sense that you arrived at 3.
But you're trying to be more
They want you
language,
to
you're trying to integrate more language and more logic into math, so that it isn't just rote and just memorization, so that you do well on problems that are word problems as opposed to, there's a lot, but I think our middle school kids are doing pretty well
Well,
in
but my
math this
concern
year.
is, and I don't know, this is not backed up by data, and so you can answer this one, but I think, and I hope that this isn't the case, but while there was that transition, I get concerned about the students who are in the middle of it at that point, because if the teachers were still working on how to be effective in their, as far as professional development was coming through, and they were learning how to teach it, those who were their new students at that time, as it's gone forward, are they meeting the levels of proficiency as they move forward? And there are some individuals who have, in the instructional side, who have said they are concerned with what they're seeing come to them. And so I want to make sure how do we, that's a totally different topic. That's not what I was bringing up initially, but since that kind of
We
involves
have
that.
pretty rigorous professional development plan to help support our teachers at the elementary level. And we've had a good start with that, but it's going to take continued professional development to support with each. And we're trying to get dollars, again, through other sources to really support at least 2 more times that we might be meeting face-to-face every single teacher to kind of work through the next piece of instructional requirements. I think it's critical to support that professional development because it is a shift for our teachers, and the quality starts there. If we want to get our students to these higher levels, we have to ensure our teachers are supported in helping them achieve that, because the accountability is going to be measured at that level, and we need to help our students perform well. And frankly, at the end of the day, I need them to be very competitive with the rest of the world.
Any others? Because you can
I'm
sit.
still talking on the math. I think some of it's going back to, we say it's going away from some of that rote learning, and going back to some of, I think you go to the basics, like the abacus, knowing all of that. Because you can say that 3 times 9 is 27, but 3 times 9 is also 3 times 10 minus 3 times 1. Because I would find ways of doing that, is always multiplying it by 10, because 10 was easier to multiply than 9 and then
Exactly what I
subtract.
do. That's exactly what I do.
And it's those kinds of tricks, and I can see it happening on the kindergarten level, because they don't just have numbers, they've got the circles and all those other things. And I think some of it is so that they see and feel and understand the numbers, not just memorize it. And my husband he tutors the kids over at, the program. He doesn't have a problem, but he does all kinds of stuff up in his head that he had the problem writing it out, everybody. So there's just different ways of doing it. And when you learn those tricks, you don't know how you learned them, you just learned them, and they don't write down so way. But like you said, if you made a mistake and all of a sudden you got, 3 times 9 and you end up with, 22, well, no, that doesn't make sense. That should be higher than that. Some of those things, I think. You just learn some of those, and I don't know I don't understand it all.
And speaking of numbers,
And not understanding
funny
numbers.
numbers, the governor, had an article in the paper on Sunday talking about, more money for education than ever before, but of course left out the stipulation, since Governor Chris was a governor, we've had 140,000 more students put into the education system, K-12 in the state, and that certainly changes the dynamics on the per student funding, so just mention that.